Good morning, everybody. I hope you're doing well today. Today we'll be looking at integers and what they are and some examples of them. So our learning targets are: I can use integers to represent qualities in real-world situations. I can compare and order integers, and I understand the meaning of opposite and absolute value, and I can use opposite and absolute value to solve integer problems. So first thing, whole numbers. Whole numbers are numbers like 0. Oops, wrong pen. They are numbers like 0, 1, 2, 3, and so forth and so on. They are no fractions, no decimals, just whole numbers. Whereas an integer, yes, includes 0, 1, 2, 3, and so forth and so on forever, but it also includes their opposites, the negative numbers. So it counts negative 3, negative 2, negative 1 as well. So integers are whole numbers and their opposites. Whole numbers and their opposites. And again, opposites just means basically the negative version. So 1 and negative 1 are opposites. So some examples of real-world positive and negative integers. Temperature, because it can be like negative 3 degrees outside. Mountain climbing, you could be 100 feet above sea level or 100 feet below sea level. And 100 feet below sea level would be a negative 100 feet. That would be how that is represented. Airplanes are hopefully just positive at like positive, 20,000 feet or something like that. If planes are at negative ground level, then that's probably a bad thing. And then banking, you can have, again, not exactly a great thing, but you could have like negative $100 in your bank account if you spent more money than you have. So those are positive and negative integers. So let's start by comparing. So how do you know which number is larger in value? So we're going to graph the numbers on a number line, and then we're going to write them in order from least to greatest. So I can see that we have a negative 8 here. So I'm going to go ahead and put a dot on negative 8. We have a negative 3, a negative 5. I'm just going to go ahead and cross these out so I don't forget them. We have a 0, a 2, and a 6. So let's go ahead and put these in order from least to greatest. Least to greatest means we're starting from the number on the very furthest to the left and working our way towards the right. So negative 8, negative 5, negative 3, 0, 2, and 6. So to know which number has a larger value, whichever one is further towards the right means it is a bigger number. So 6 is bigger than 2, 2 is bigger than 0, 0 is bigger than negative 3, negative 3 is bigger than negative 5 is bigger than negative 8. Now, somewhere that people often get messed up is with these negatives. They look at negative 8s, and yes, that is an 8, and negative 5, and they often think negative 5 should be bigger. Well, with negative numbers, it's kind of the opposite way. Now, with positives, we know, 5 is smaller than 8 if it was positive. But when it's negative, the bigger the negative number, the smaller it actually is. So like negative 100 is smaller than negative 1. Because again, the further towards the right that you go, the bigger it gets. So let's go ahead and compare these. 5 and negative 7, we're going to use greater than or less than. Well, I know 5 is positive, negative 7 is negative. A positive number will always be greater than a negative number. So 5 is greater than negative 7. 0 and negative 2, again, 0, while it's not technically positive nor negative, 2 is definitely negative. So it's going to be greater than as well. And if you also think about our number line, 0 is further towards the right than negative 2. Negative 8, negative 2, this is where it gets tricky. Again, remember, the bigger the negative number, the smaller it actually is. So this is going to be a less than symbol. Negative 8 is less than negative 2. And again, negative 8 is further towards the left than negative 2 is on the number line, so negative 2 has to be bigger. And 6 and 0, hopefully we all know 6 is bigger than 0. Nothing's changing there. So that is comparing some numbers here. So looking at some new vocabulary, opposites or additive inverse. This is just whenever you add a number adding two numbers and making 0. Adding two numbers to get 0. And the way we would do that is by using their opposites. So like -3 plus 3, or -4 plus 4, -10 plus 10. All of these are called additive inverses. Additive inverses. It's where you add them and get 0. And it just means they're opposites of each other. Because if you think about a number line, we have 1, 2, 3, so that's -3, 0, 1, 2, 3. Whoops, that 1 doesn't go there. If we think about a number line, like this one here, we would have a -3 over here and a 3 over here. And if you put them together, it reaches you back to the middle. And so we'll work with that a little more next class, but additive inverse just means opposites, so 3 and -3. Absolute value is an even bigger concept. Absolute value means the distance from 0. The distance from 0. And so when we think of distance from 0, we're going to use these symbols here. It looks like railroad tracks, so just tall, straight, parallel lines. And so this right here would mean the absolute value of 7. Or this would be the absolute value, I'm going to use a different color, absolute value of -5. So what these questions are asking for is simply, how far is 7 from 0? And how far is -5 from 0? Well, if we count it up on a number line, 7 would be 7 spots from 0. This next one is a little tricky. -5 is not -5 spots from 0. -5 is still just 5 spots from 0. Because if you think about distance, again, we're working with distance here. Distance is always positive. Always positive. So when you do absolute value of a number, you're never going to have a negative answer. There is one specific situation where you would, but it's not because the absolute value itself is negative. It's because there'd be a negative on the outside, but we'll get to that again at a later time. But key thing to note here, absolute value, your answer is always positive. So let's keep moving. So this first one says, how far is 4 from 0? Well, 4 is right here. And that means 1, 2, 3, 4. So 4 is 4 spots from 0. And then it says, how far is -4 from 0? Well, we got -4 here. 1, 2, 3, 4. Looky there again. It's 4. Now, both of them say which direction. 4 is 4 spots from 0 in the positive direction, or towards the right, whereas -4 is towards the left. So what do these numbers have in common? They have the same absolute value. -4, +4, the same absolute value. Alrighty. Again, graphing each integer on the number line. 3, hopefully we can do that one pretty easily right here. And -7 pretty easily right here. Now, where this gets tricky is letter C. It says the negative of -2, or what that also could say is the opposites of -2. Go ahead and take a second and try to plot that one on a number line. Alrighty, you should have hopefully placed it right here on the 2. Because yes, it's -2, but we have the opposite of -2. And remember, opposite of -2, that would just be +2. Now let's go ahead and work on some more absolute values before we finish this up. So it says, what is the symbol for absolute value? Hopefully we know that's our railroad tracks here, these two parallel lines. And that absolute value is always positive and never negative. In some examples, we have the absolute value of -6. Well, I know -6 is just going to be 6 spots from 0. And we also have the absolute value of +6, which should also just be 6 spots from 0. And if we went ahead and tested that, we've got +6 here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So that worked out. And negative 6 is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So it's still 6 spots on both of these. Now I'll do the first row with you guys, and then I'll have you do the second row on your own. So letter A. Actually, I'm going to do letters A and D with you, and then I'll have you do the other 4 on your own. So this says the opposites of negative 21. Well, the opposite of negative 21 is just positive 21. This next one's where it gets interesting. So this one says the opposites of the absolute value of negative 32. Now, I know a few moments ago we said absolute value is always positive and never negative, which is 100% true. So we got to think about this problem in 2 steps. Let's start with just this here. The absolute value of negative 32 is 32 because it's 32 spots from 0. However, there is that negative in front. That negative says we want the opposite of our answer. So we want the opposite of 32, which is going to be negative 32. So the really key thing here, if you have a negative on the outside of your absolute value, like we did here, your answer is simply going to be negative. If the negative is on the outside of your absolute value, it is going to be a negative answer. So go ahead and take the next minute or 2, pause the video, and solve these ones. Alrighty, so 11 minus 4 is 7, but we want the opposites of our answer, which means we need to go ahead and stick the negative on for negative 7 because we have the opposite of 11 minus 4. This next one's pretty tricky. Negative h, which again means the opposites of h, the opposite of h, if h is 17. Well, if we go ahead and plug 17 back in for our h, because we know what h is, we don't need to leave a letter there, then we want to go ahead and plug this back into parentheses. So it says the opposites of 17, which hopefully we know is negative 17. Again, whenever you plug a number in for a letter, always put it in parentheses. It's going to really be helpful for you guys moving forward. So this one, we take the h away, we put the 17 in parentheses, and then it's the opposites of 17. Absolute value of 10, well, that is 10 spots from 0. And probably the trickiest problem of all, negative h if h equals negative 14. Again, we're going to replace the h with the actual number because there's no reason to have a letter if we know what the number is. So we're going to take this and put it over here instead. And like I said, always put it in parentheses. So we have negative 14 in parentheses. And we have this h, which we cannot neglect. We need to bring it down as well. So this is the opposites of negative 14. Well, opposite of negative 14 should be positive 14. So this one's a positive 14 here. Where people often make mistakes is that they do not put parentheses and they see the negative already with the h and they see that the 14 is negative. So they just assume that the negative in front of our h is the negative that goes with the 14. That is not true. This negative here tells us that we want the opposite of h, the opposite of h. And if h is negative 14, then we want the opposite of negative 14, which is positive 14. And that's going to do it for our notes today. If you guys have any questions, please reach out and let me know. But I hope you guys have a great day.